Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Yeah, let's get going. Here I am joined by three amazing leaders on this topic. We are talking about certifications, what matters, what doesn't. This can be a little bit of a confusing piece of the puzzle. So just really quickly, I'd like to introduce my panelists. We have Julie Johnson of Stanley Stella. We have Sara Osorio of Printing United Alliance. And we have Lane Hokanson of Goldstar. Ladies, gosh, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah. So you know what? Let's just dive in. Sara, first question is for you. Sustainable certifications, like I mentioned, can feel really confusing and they can feel daunting and it can feel hard to even know where to begin. Why do you think that is?
So I think the biggest, I'm not going to say obstacle, but I think the first reason why they are so daunting and overwhelming is the sheer amount of them that they are. I mean, there are so many different certifications to look through, choose from. So I think it becomes a challenge figuring out what it is exactly that you're looking for your business. And then in that same line of thinking, not all certifications necessarily carry the same weight. So it's really important to do your due diligence, look at where your business is meeting, and really naturally ask that question: is it credible? Is the criteria, robust? So I think that's really important. And then I think another reason why it might be a little bit confusing and daunting is because a lot of these certifications are built with very large brands and very large companies in mind, not necessarily your average print shop, which is a much smaller operation. I mean, a lot of these certifications are built for companies that have dedicated either EHS teams or sustainability teams. So implementing them, sometimes just the sheer amount of documentation that you have to put together for some of these certifications can be technical. And I say that from experience. In past life, I worked on implementing an ISO 45001 safety certification, and I mean, that takes months, if not years, to get through. So they're difficult, and there's also a lot of technical aspects related to them that can be a little bit confusing. So yeah, I think those are the two biggest reasons, among many others, that would make certifications a little bit daunting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I saw in the comments, there's always the topic of cost, right? And so some of these certifications come with costs associated with them, and that can be daunting as well. Julie, the intention is always to improve, right? And that's a lot of what these certifications are geared toward, right? They're geared toward helping our businesses improve. Um, Sometimes that can feel again a little bit, I don't want to say green hushing because you see some of these headlines about how certification, some of these companies come under fire. That's normal for any sort of discussion where people are trying to work to improve. How do we as an industry ensure that these certifications do remain important, do remain as like useful tools and implementing them for real action?
Yeah, so definitely. So certifications are a very valuable tool, and they're great at identifying alignment of values between businesses, right? So we should continue to support the credible ones out there. But I think it's important to just look at the certifications as a starting point, almost like a bare minimum, okay? And we need to go beyond the certification itself. Use it kind of as a starting point, not as your end goal, right? It's not, I've got the certificate checkbox, right? Like for example, when it comes to GOTS, right? The GOTS organic cotton that we use. In terms of Stanley Stella, right? We have the certification, we meet all the requirements, but then we go beyond that and we do randomized third-party testing of our cotton at the ginning and spinning stages to ensure it hasn't been contaminated, right? So we're not just relying on the certification itself, right? So we can support these certifications and their validity by really embracing the responsibility ourselves and going beyond it. So raising our own standards and going deeper within the supply chain.
Lane, anything you want to add to that thought process about like the importance and implementation of certifications?
Well, it's funny because I think Julie copied my notes or I copied hers because I have a lot of the same things to say, just that certifications really are that tool. They're not the end goal. they are so valuable in the sense that they give us that framework so that we can understand everybody is hitting the same metrics. There isn't any of that weighed towards bigger companies or smaller companies, but it's really all about that measurable progress. And I know that validation from a third party can really make that feel a lot more believable, less greenwashing, none of that kind of, well, I think we're doing a great job, or I'm recycling a little bit. And I think it's really all about giving the story behind those certifications. They are meaningful, but like Teresa was saying earlier, having those digital product passports or having ways that you can see where material comes from, all of that conversation and context for the customer and our audience is really going to be even more meaningful than those certifications.
Yeah. We've kind of already started to touch a little bit on some of the more popular ones, right? Sara, in addition to, we've had GOTS brought up already. Ecotex is a big one, right? Can you kind of maybe provide like a high level list of some of the more popular sustainability certifications out there?
Sure. So I'm going to go back sort of to my first answer because there's so many of them, and I think they can be broken down into two separate groups. You have the certifications that are more product specific and they focus on the specific product attributes, so like organic cotton, FSC certified paper, that kind of thing. And then you can have certifications that are more general and broad in scope, and they're more about the manufacturing process. You have things like EcoVadis. My personal favorite is going to be SGP, or the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership. Both types of certifications are valuable for different reasons. One, it looks more at downstream and upstream impacts, like the product-specific ones, versus more looking at how to improve how your shop runs day by day. So I mentioned SGP specifically because unlike all of these other certifications, again, going back to my first answer, being designed for really big companies, SGP is made by the printing industry for the printing industry. There is a lot of input from the different trade associations that cover printing and SGP. And the beauty of SGP is that they have been able to take these certifications that are very complex and made them for printing, and they provide so many resources that it takes out a lot of the work that a dedicated sustainability team would be doing. And SGP is beautiful because it is not specific to a print process or a specific type of print plant. It looks at your process holistically from beginning to end. So you can be a supplier of print and be SGP certified. But then when you pair SGP with something like Ecotex, with something like GOTS, I call that the magic combo because you're sort of hitting every single point. So that's when you have more than one certification kind of covering different things, I think that's when you start seeing this sustainability story where one is speaking to your operations, the other one is speaking to the products that you're offering. So I think it's also really important to start looking at sustainability from all the different fonts and all the different areas that can be covered through these certifications, because again, there's so many of them, it's hard to keep up.
It is, and thank you for providing that list, and then also highlighting why some of these are maybe not easier, but more realistic to implement, right? They come with tools and ways to help you implement them in your business. But I am also curious, Julie, and maybe you can speak to this, what makes these specific certifications stand out in our industry, in, the apparel and the promo and the printing industry?
Right. So it's interesting. A lot of the certifications that Sara is dealing with are different than the ones that we're dealing with on the apparel side. But she did mention GOTS, which is considered the gold standard for organic cotton. Plus, it's coupled with the environmental and social aspects as well, right? But from the textile side, there's also GRS for the global recycled standard, and then Ocotex is a huge one. Again, it's a gold standard, and this one's specific to, ensuring products do not contain any harmful chemicals for people. But then beyond that, in the textile world, there's Textile Exchange, Fair Wear, there's B Corp, there's BCI, and there's Blue Sign.
So quite a few, right? And so,
Yeah,
but
it really is. And I think that that's why people can be a little overwhelming if you're a decorator dealing with soft goods and hard goods. And then you're looking at certifications for your processes themselves. It could be a big thing to tackle.
right. I mean, my best recommendation, and I would say this kind of across the board for any business thing that you're trying to change, is decide what your goals are for your business and pick a certification that aligns with that. I mean, I really think, like, don't try and pick all of them. Lane, speaking of that, there are some challenges that still persist surrounding sustainability and specifically in certification. Some promo people, decorators, printers may make the argument that getting a certification or purchasing certified products maybe isn't beneficial, but why is that not true?
Ooh, I love that. I think that it's important to view ourselves as decorators as being more of a sustainability expert than we might think of ourselves as. We often have kind of the voice of the product that goes to the end user, whether that's someone you're speaking to directly, or if you're on the supplier side and you're speaking to a distributor. But I think, as we've kind of already mentioned, sustainability is a story and it gives context and kind of content for your materials. So it's not that you necessarily need to memorize all these acronyms, none of which are easy to remember, by the way. There's GRE, GRS, FSC, and if anybody says them fast, you're done for. But what it gives you more of a story about where the materials are coming from, why it's valuable. You mentioned it earlier, but I think people think of our industry as kind of a one and done. And I think we've really shifted that story for branded merchandise because the most sustainable product is one that you're going to keep. And if it has the benefit of being made responsibly by having some of those third-party certifications, it's going to be infinitely more valuable. And if possible, if it's at a great price as well, because I know that that is an important contact to our industry, that's even better. But that certification can really help drive and meet demand with confidence.
Yeah. Sarah, I'd be curious to also hear your thoughts since you kind of also bring in more of that like commercial print, bigger print industry perspective. I mean, why would you say kind of in that entire conversation or viewpoint that, arguing that sustainable certification isn't beneficial isn't necessarily true?
Yeah, well, first let me start by echoing what Lane said. Sustainability is a journey. There's no endpoint. When we reach the net zero endpoint, it's going to be okay. Well, how can we now be regenerative? So there's never going to be an end. Certifications are the beginning, and it's all about continuous improvement. Why I think certifications are very important is because they build credibility, and at this stage in the game, they're going to protect you from greenwashing. I mean, greenwashing is a big issue. There's lawsuits every day. Some go through, some don't. But what they do, just look at Keurig. I mean, they got fined in Canada, or they had a lawsuit in Canada, they had a lawsuit in the US, and they got fined in the US by the FTC. So greenwashing is a huge one. Customers are becoming very skeptical of these vague claims, and they're looking out for these buzzwords. So eco-friendly, or this is made with green practices. Okay, what does that mean? They want to see proof, they want to see numbers. But then on a different note, I think the data collection that is required for certifications, because they all required in some form data collection, documentation, tracking, this is going to prepare decorators for regulation that is coming. Because even if you kind of mentioned my commercial side, so I am going to kind of put that hat on for a little bit, but this can even apply to apparel. Companies in California that make more than $1 billion are going to have to report their greenhouse gases. That includes Scope 3 greenhouse gases. Scope 3 greenhouse gases are supply chain. So even if the decorator themselves is not reporting to California, their customer has to report the printer's emissions to California. So it's not just about you complying, it's also about making sure that your clients are in compliance with a lot of the regulations that are coming down the pipe. And I know, Cassie, you kind of talked about this with Teresa in the beginning, but we're seeing a lot of growth in extended producer responsibility, greenhouse gas accounting, supply chain transparency and traceability. So I really think that third-party validity, that weight that it's going to carry, is going to be a huge competitive advantage for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're kind of coming up to the end of our session, but I do have one more question that I want to fire away at Julie. There's another side of this equation, right, in this conversation, and that's not, we have the one side where your business might achieve those certifications, but then you also see a lot of people looking to source a certified product or a certified blank. And that's something Stanley Stella is very transparent about, right? And so how do decorators, promotional people, anyone working in this industry determine which of these blanks are credible and which are maybe just greenwashing or maybe not carry as much weight?
Sure, sure. So I would focus on certifications that are very well known, okay? Ones that are well respected and have some longevity to them, right? You're not looking for trendy ones coming in and out, right? And I would say to understand the context of the certification. I know that a lot of people don't want to dig into those gory details, but I think it's important. All of these certification companies have a website that you can go to, and it tells you very straightforward what it's all about. Listen to other people in the industry, listen to your customers, see if you can hear, common themes that are going on, common requests out there. And then you should just use the certification, as just a guiding light, right? Look for the companies that are going beyond. And as a tool, like if I was a decorator and I was wanting to promote products, and I was, tangled up in a lot of different certifications that I needed to remember, I would create maybe like a selling sheet, right, that had just a brief reference of what these certifications stand for. And if you have a website, maybe you have just a web page that's dedicated to it that you can, refer your customers to. But some type of an easy tool, but you want to keep it clear. You don't want to complicate it. Just make it very straightforward and just highlight a couple of the main points of those certifications.
I love it. What a great action item to end this discussion on. I know that this was such a quick look at certifications. So in the chat, everybody, make sure if you have questions for our panelists or you want to explore more, go ahead and drop some contact information in there or let them know you want to reach out. Again, Julie, Sara, Lane, thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cassie.